The early morning fog still lingered over the Montecito hills, casting a sleepy, golden haze over the rooftops of sprawling estates. But inside one particular mansion, sleek, cold, towering with modern ambition, the stillness was broken by a sound so raw it silenced even the birds perched on palm trees outside. A scream, then another, followed by the sharp crash of shattering glass. Staff froze in their tracks. Phones were dropped. One maid whispered under her breath, "It's happening again." But none of them dared to move. Behind those sculpted marble walls and designer curtains, Meghan Markle stood in the middle of the kitchen, barefoot, hair tangled, rage spilling from every trembling muscle. She had just slammed her phone against the granite counter, pieces of it scattering like bullets across the polished floor. Her breathing was labored. Her eyes were wild. And on the screen of the now-cracked device, a photo had just loaded. One she couldn't unsee. One that might be the end of everything. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The man who sent the image? Cory Vitiello. The same Cory who had once been Meghan's boyfriend. A man she left behind when Prince Harry walked into her life, or more precisely, when she walked into his. For years, Cory had stayed silent, watching, waiting, holding a secret. But now he had acted, and not just with words, with proof. A single picture, taken years ago, at a private event no one was supposed to photograph. In it, Meghan, unmistakable even in dim lighting, is seen draped across the lap of an unknown gentleman. She is laughing, her top half unclothed, her hands teasingly playing with the bra she had just removed. Her gaze is seductive, unapologetic. The man's identity is obscured, but the setting is unmistakably exclusive. Yachts, high-end champagne, and a backdrop only frequented by the world's wealthiest and most powerful. Attached to the photo was a simple message. He deserves to know who she really is. Meghan's scream wasn't just anger, it was fear, panic. The kind of scream that comes when a carefully constructed empire begins to crack under the weight of its own lies. For years, she had fought to control the narrative. The underdog who married a prince. The humanitarian. The trailblazing duchess. She built that persona brick by brick, press by press, deal by deal. And now, with a single click, it was all collapsing. Prince Harry was upstairs when it happened. He had just stepped out of the shower, unaware that the moment which would redefine his marriage had just arrived. By the time he came downstairs, Meghan was pacing like a caged animal. Her eyes locked on him, red, furious, and terrified. "Did you see it?" she hissed. "See what?" he asked, stepping closer. She threw the cracked phone toward him, the screen still glowing faintly. He caught it by instinct, flipping it around, and froze. The silence between them was thick, suffocating. Harry didn't speak, didn't blink, didn't even breathe for a long moment. He just stared at the image, his face pale, lips parted slightly. And then he whispered, almost to himself, "When was this taken?" Meghan rushed toward him. "It's fake. Do you hear me? This is photoshopped. It's not what it looks like. He's trying to destroy us." But even as she protested, her voice cracked. Harry noticed. And worse, he knew that look in her eyes. The look of someone not just afraid of being misunderstood, but of being found out. Cory Vitiello's message didn't come out of nowhere. According to sources close to him, he had grown increasingly disturbed over the years watching Meghan reinvent herself as a feminist icon, royal disruptor, and media darling, all while sweeping her past under a royal rug. When the headlines turned vicious against Harry, when his mental health was questioned, his military honor smeared, his family bonds severed, Cory decided it was time to act. Not out of spite, but out of a lingering sense of conscience. Harry doesn't know who she really is, he reportedly told a mutual friend. And when he finds out, it'll be too late. The photo was just the beginning. There were others. Videos. Messages. Stories from people who had remained silent for fear of reprisal. But Cory knew that one image could do more than 100 words. And he was right. The moment Harry saw it, something inside him shifted. Subtle, but permanent. He didn't scream. He didn't accuse. He didn't even say much at all. He just stared at Meghan, a long, searching gaze, and asked quietly, "Why didn't you ever tell me about this?" Meghan broke down. For the first time in their marriage, she sobbed uncontrollably, not for show, not for sympathy, but out of desperation. "I didn't think it mattered," she whispered. "I was young. I was trying to survive. They invited me. I didn't know what I was getting into. I left when I realized." But even as she spoke, she knew it wasn't enough. Not anymore. Outside their home, paparazzi lenses were already adjusting. Someone had leaked the image. The Daily Mail had it. So did Page 6. Within minutes, hashtags were trending. Hashtag Sugar Baby Meghan. Hashtag Markle Exposed. Hashtag Royal Scandal. Rumors that had floated beneath the surface for years were now center stage. And this time, no PR firm could spin it away. The timing couldn't have been worse. Meghan had just signed a new development deal in Los Angeles, a project she described as empowering, healing, and authentic. Netflix had quietly pushed her cooking show into development limbo, already wary of poor viewer engagement. Spotify had walked away, and now, the public perception was spiraling. Meghan wasn't a survivor. She was an opportunist. At least, that's what the headlines were starting to say. But the real fallout wasn't in headlines. It was in Harry's silence. For days, he barely spoke. Walks alone on the beach. Long drives without explanation. The security team grew nervous. Staff whispered behind closed doors. And Meghan? She was unraveling. Not just emotionally, strategically. Every move she made reeked of desperation. A sudden photo shoot with the kids. A leaked, heartfelt letter to Diana. Calls to Oprah. No answer. Even Tyler Perry reportedly distanced himself, canceling a planned visit. What people didn't know, yet, was that this wasn't the first time someone had warned Harry about Meghan, but it was the first time someone had come with irrefutable proof. Cory's picture wasn't just a snapshot of a moment. It was a mirror, one that reflected back the truth behind the fairy tale. And it left everyone asking, who is Meghan Markle, really? That question would now dominate headlines, conversations, and dinner tables across the world. The public wanted to know. The royals wanted to know. But most importantly, Harry needed to know. Because until now, he had built his life on a foundation that was cracking at the seams. This expose will take you behind the velvet curtain, into the hidden corners of Meghan's past. We will walk through the story of a woman who captured a prince, but may have done so with a mask, not a heart. We'll examine the photographic evidence, trace the timelines, speak with those who were silenced, and follow the money, the fame, the ambition. Because this story isn't just about a picture. It's about power, manipulation, betrayal, and the slow, devastating collapse of a dream Harry believed in, until now. So stay with us as we uncover the full truth. From yacht parties to palace corridors, from whispered secrets to tabloid bombshells, the path Meghan walked is not the one the public saw. And once you know what really happened, you'll never look at her, or their marriage, the same way again. The sky above Montecito was deceptively calm that afternoon, the kind of stillness that usually preludes a storm. And inside the sprawling estate once hailed as the power symbol of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, the storm had already hit. This wasn't the typical celebrity meltdown. This wasn't about a script not getting greenlit, a press article not being flattering enough, or a dress not arriving in time for a red carpet. This was something else. Something uncontainable. Something that rattled even the most seasoned staff who had seen the worst of tantrums and stage dramatics. A gust of fury swept through the villa's east wing like a hurricane. It began with a sharp scream, not the performative kind, but primal, human. Meghan's voice cracked through the silence like a whip. Then came the crashing. A vase, a picture frame, a phone. Then the guttural sobs. Broken, bitter, and furious. Meghan Markle stood in the center of the marble-floored kitchen, barefoot, shaking, mascara streaking down her face. She wasn't composed. She wasn't poised. Her usual carefully controlled facade had shattered along with the phone she had just hurled across the room. The pristine calm of her Montecito lifestyle had been ruptured, not by external forces, but by something far more dangerous, a truth she couldn't control. The staff didn't dare enter. They had been trained, or warned, to stay away when she reached this level of emotion. It wasn't the first time. There had been incidents, moments when the Duchess would explode into fits of shouting, accusations, self-pity. But this time was different. This time, something real had shifted. There was no spin strategy, no press release ready, no glam squad to fix what had just unraveled in seconds. It had started just 30 minutes earlier. Meghan had been scrolling through her messages while sipping a turmeric latte at the kitchen island. The house was unusually quiet. Harry was upstairs reading. The children, or what the public believed to be children, were being attended to by nannies. She had been scheduled to jump on a video call with her stylist in New York for an upcoming magazine shoot. But then, a new message came in. From a name that froze her breath, Cory Vitiello. Cory, her ex-boyfriend, her ex-lover. The one person who knew her before the palace, before the tiaras, before the Duchess moniker. The one she had walked away from when Prince Harry became available. A man she had referred to in private circles as her golden exit. She hadn't heard from Cory in years. Not a word. And suddenly, there he was, slipping back into her life with a vengeance and a payload. The message was short, almost eerily polite. You might want to explain this before the world sees it. Attached was a photo. The same one that would end up on Harry's screen just minutes later. Meghan's heart dropped into her stomach before she even opened it. She knew. She didn't need to see it to know exactly which image it was. Her fingers trembled as she tapped on it, the loading circle spinning just long enough to feel like torture. Then it appeared. There she was, barely dressed, in the arms of a wealthy older man, laughing, seductively playful, completely oblivious to the camera that must have been hidden or expertly timed. The moment she saw it, her scream erupted. The phone slipped out of her hands, bounced against the granite counter, and skidded onto the floor. She tried to deny it to herself, that it existed, that someone had held on to it, that someone would dare weaponize it now. But denial couldn't erase what her eyes had just seen. What made the moment worse, what tipped her over the edge, was that it had reached Harry. She hadn't even had time to block it, delete it, or rewrite the narrative. Cory had gone directly to Harry. That betrayal cut deep, not just because of the implication, but because Cory knew exactly how to break her world apart. He hadn't just exposed a scandal. He had punctured her carefully curated bubble, the illusion she had built around herself and her marriage. Harry entered the room, having heard the scream and the subsequent crash. He looked around, shards of ceramic glinting underfoot, the tension in the air so heavy it was choking. He looked at Meghan, her hands still trembling, her eyes wide with something between panic and dread. "What happened?" he asked cautiously. She didn't answer. She just pointed to the phone, now cracked but still glowing. He picked it up. The screen flickered but managed to show the last open message. Harry's breath hitched. He tapped the photo, and there it was. A still image, but one loud enough to speak volumes. He didn't speak. His face went pale. The expression in his eyes shifted from confusion to disbelief to something darker. Not anger. Not yet. But suspicion. The kind of suspicion that grows fast and deep when a single moment rewrites everything you thought you knew about someone. Meghan stepped forward, tears already pooling in her eyes. "It's not what it looks like," she said quickly. "It's old. It's taken out of context." Harry's silence was deafening. "I was young. I didn't have money. I didn't have options. That man, he wasn't a client or anything like that. He was just a friend. It was a private party." His eyes narrowed slightly. "You were taking your bra off for a friend?" he asked, voice low. She froze. Her lips parted to answer, but nothing came out. "It was a joke," she finally blurted. "You know how people party in LA. It was wild. Stupid. I was performing for the camera. That's it." The desperation in her voice only made the moment heavier. Harry turned away, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. The room fell into an agonizing silence again, only broken by the soft buzzing of the cracked phone on the floor, more notifications coming in. Someone else had the photo. Multiple people, most likely. She knew what was coming next. The leaks. The headlines. The commentary. Her carefully engineered image as a champion for female dignity and empowerment was about to be obliterated by a photo that told a different story. Outside, reporters hadn't arrived yet, but the wind was picking up. The weather had begun to shift. Clouds rolled in from the Pacific, dark and unrelenting. Back inside, Meghan reached for Harry's hand, but he pulled away, not violently, but with the slow, resigned energy of a man coming to terms with something soul-breaking. "I trusted you," he said, not shouting, not dramatic, just quiet devastation. "You still can," she whispered. "Please. We can fix this. I can talk to Cory. I'll deny everything. I'll say it's edited." Harry turned back to her, his jaw tight. "That's not what I asked you." "What do you mean?" I asked why you never told me. About this. About who you were before. That single sentence hung in the air like a verdict. And then, without another word, he left the room. Meghan collapsed into a chair, gripping the edge as if her entire world was tipping. And maybe it was. Because this wasn't just about a photo. It was about the realization that the man she married might never look at her the same again. Outside, the Montecito breeze stirred, as if carrying whispers of a secret no longer safe. Before Prince Harry ever walked into Meghan Markle's life with the glimmering allure of royalty and a path to global fame, there was another man who stood beside her. Not in palaces, not in paparazzi-filled corridors, but in kitchens, dinner parties, and quiet urban restaurants tucked away from Hollywood glare. That man was Cory Vitiello. Cory wasn't a prince. He didn't come with a crown or a castle. But he had something else Meghan craved: influence. Not the kind that splashes across tabloids, but the kind that opens doors behind closed ones. A rising Canadian celebrity chef, charismatic, ambitious, and deeply connected to Canada's political and cultural elite, Cory was the perfect stepping stone in Meghan's slow, deliberate climb. They met sometime in 2014 in Toronto when Meghan was working on Suits. At the time, she was still considered a B-list actress. No one in Buckingham Palace had heard of her. She hadn't yet graced the cover of Vanity Fair or hobnobbed with A-listers at Soho House. But she was hungry. She knew where she wanted to be. And Cory, by all accounts, seemed like the right companion on that journey. Their relationship was relatively quiet by celebrity standards. They weren't tabloid fodder, but insiders knew them as a serious couple. They shared a home. Cory introduced Meghan to political circles, including people close to Justin Trudeau. Meghan began appearing at fundraisers, charity galas, and swanky dinners where politicians and tastemakers mingled. She wasn't just another actress anymore. She was becoming part of the elite. According to friends who knew them back then, Meghan's transformation during her time with Cory was stark. She moved from casual conversations about acting to more deliberate discussions about branding, public image, and legacy. She studied the strategies of women like Amal Clooney and Angelina Jolie, women who had leveraged fame into humanitarian gravitas. Meghan didn't want to be a starlet. She wanted to be a force. But not everything in the relationship was stable. There were whispers that Meghan often grew restless. She wanted more attention, more recognition, more access. And though Cory was respected in his circles, his world didn't offer the kind of global platform Meghan desired. That restlessness began to show in subtle ways. One friend recalled how Meghan would attend events without Cory, insisting she needed to network alone. Others noted how her social media, back when she ran the TIG lifestyle blog, became less about shared experiences and more about solo ambitions. The once cozy domestic relationship began to crack under the pressure of two people moving in different directions. And then, one day, without fanfare or headlines, Meghan left. Cory was blindsided. According to sources close to him, he hadn't seen it coming. One day, they were planning a future together. The next, she had packed up and vanished into the whirlwind of a new, secret relationship, one with a royal prince. At first, Cory stayed silent. He didn't give interviews. He didn't retaliate. In fact, he carried on with quiet dignity. But those who knew him well saw the toll it took. One colleague from his restaurant described Cory as heartbroken, but more confused than angry. He couldn't understand how someone he thought he knew, someone he had loved, could so completely abandon their shared life for someone else, especially someone from a world so vastly different. Years passed, and still, Cory said nothing. Even when Meghan and Harry's romance became public. Even when she gave that now infamous Vanity Fair interview proclaiming, "We're in love." Even when the world shifted to place Meghan on a pedestal as a biracial Cinderella rewriting the rules of royalty, Cory remained silent. But silence is not forgetfulness. Over time, bits and pieces began to surface. Friends of Cory began dropping hints in interviews. A former associate once said, "There's more to Meghan's past than she wants you to know." Another added, "She was always chasing something, someone bigger." But it wasn't until Meghan's marriage to Harry began to fray that Cory finally made his move. Why now? Why after all this time? Insiders believe it wasn't revenge that motivated Cory, it was concern. He had watched the cracks in Harry and Meghan's marriage widen. He had seen the toll it was taking on Harry, the isolation, the family rift, the headlines that painted him as broken, angry, paranoid. And Cory, perhaps seeing something all too familiar in Meghan's patterns, decided Harry deserved to know the truth, the unfiltered version of Meghan's past. And so, the photo was sent. But that image, as controversial and damaging as it was, told only part of the story. Cory knew more. Much more. He had seen the signs before. The ambition that crossed ethical boundaries. The performative kindness. The way Meghan could shift personas depending on who she was with. Elegant duchess to one, seductive flirt to another. She was, in Cory's words, a chameleon. And while he didn't blame her entirely, after all, she had grown up in a world where survival sometimes required transformation, he did believe the truth mattered. Especially to someone like Harry, who had sacrificed so much to be with her. To understand Cory's decision to speak out, one has to look at what he witnessed and what he endured. This wasn't just about a breakup. It was about being used, discarded, and then watching the person who did it go on to build a public image rooted in virtue and vulnerability. One of Cory's closest friends, speaking anonymously, said, "It wasn't the breakup that hurt him. It was watching her lie so well to the world. Pretending she came from nothing. Pretending she was just a girl caught in a fairy tale. She wasn't. She was calculating. And she knew exactly what she was doing." Still, Cory didn't go to the press. He didn't take money for interviews. He didn't sign a book deal. Instead, he took a quieter route, one that would allow Harry to confront the truth privately before the world inevitably caught up. But once the image leaked, once it spread through group chats, gossip sites, and eventually media outlets, the story was no longer private. And now, the world was watching. Was Cory's choice justified? That depends on who you ask. To some, he is a scorned ex lashing out after years of silence. To others, he is a whistleblower, someone trying to protect a man who gave up everything for love. But one thing is certain, Cory Vitiello's role in this story is far from over. Because the question is no longer just, who is Meghan Markle? It's also, who knew? And why did they stay quiet? Cory did know. And now that he's broken his silence, the ripple effect has reached Buckingham Palace, Hollywood, and every media outlet between. And Harry, caught in the center of it all, must now confront not only his wife's past, but his own willingness to overlook it. It arrived on a Thursday, not with a press release, not with an expose and a scandal sheet, but with a silent buzz on a smartphone. A single image, uncaptioned, no context. But it didn't need context. Not for Prince Harry, not for Meghan Markle, not for the few people in Hollywood and the UK press who'd already heard rumors of its existence for years. It was that photo, the one some whispered about in elite LA circles, the one that had allegedly been taken at a closed-door yacht event in Cannes nearly a decade earlier, the one that Meghan had worked very hard and spent good money to ensure never saw the light of day. But now it had returned, and it was as raw, damning, and emotionally destructive as ever. When Harry first saw it, he froze. His instincts weren't political. They weren't legal. They weren't even royal. They were deeply personal. His body tensed. His eyes scanned the image over and over again, searching for some clue, some pixelated inconsistency that might make it untrue. But there she was, Meghan Markle. Unmistakably Meghan. Her unmistakable half-smile. Her jawline, the slight scar just beneath her collarbone. Harry had traced it 100 times with his fingertips. There was no denying it. Her back arched, arms wrapped around the neck of a middle-aged man in a tailored linen suit. She was perched on his lap, braless, with a barely-there dress hanging loosely off her shoulders. Her hand was in the air, holding what appeared to be her own bra, as though she had just removed it mid-conversation. And she was laughing. Not nervously. Not hesitantly. But comfortably. Like this wasn't her first time in that pose. Like this wasn't unusual for her. Like this was routine. The man's face was partially turned, obscured just enough to hide his identity, but hints in the background suggested his status. The setting was unmistakably a private deck on a luxury yacht, the kind that never sees commercial docks, where guests arrive by helicopter and cell phones are collected in advance. These are the circles where young, beautiful women mingle with older, powerful men. A transactional environment masquerading as elite leisure. The kind of place where reputations are bought, bartered, and buried. Harry didn't speak for a long time after seeing it. He simply stared at the photo on the cracked screen, his jaw tightening with every second. The silence between him and Meghan grew thicker, colder. Finally, he turned to her. "Who took this?" he asked. His voice was quiet, but not calm. She didn't answer right away. He repeated, "Meghan, who took this?" "I don't know," she whispered. "It was years ago." His hand lowered, the phone still lit in his palm. "Where was this?" "France, I think." "Can maybe. I told you I was invited to those parties back then." "Who's the man?" "I don't remember," she said too quickly. He scoffed. Not cruelly, but incredulously. "You don't remember the man whose lap you're sitting in, with your bra in your hand, on a yacht?" "I didn't sleep with him, if that's what you're thinking." "I didn't ask that." The air between them was scorching, despite the California breeze coming through the windows. Meghan stepped forward, eyes pleading. "It was a performance," she said. "We were all drinking. People were dancing, showing off. You know what those places are like." Nothing happened. Harry didn't move. "There are other pictures," he said finally. Meghan's eyes widened. "What?" "There are other pictures, Meg. This one is just the one Cory sent. But there are more. They've already started surfacing online. I've seen 2 others. Not this graphic, but enough. Enough to raise questions." She staggered backward slightly. "They're photoshopped," she insisted. "They have to be. This is a smear campaign. Someone is trying to destroy me." "Then why didn't you tell me about it before?" he asked. "Why didn't you warn me that something like this existed?" "I didn't think it would matter," she said, voice cracking. "I was trying to protect you. Protect us." Harry didn't buy it. He had stood by her through media storms, through family estrangement, through palace chaos. He had turned his back on the institution that raised him, on his brother, on his father, and all for what? A woman he thought he knew, a story he believed in, a partnership he thought was founded on truth, no matter how messy. Now that foundation was fracturing under the weight of a single image. As the news began to spread, first through gossip accounts on Instagram, then through encrypted messaging groups, and finally through mainstream tabloid feeds, the court of public opinion ignited. Every side had something to say. Her defenders called it slut-shaming. Her critics declared it vindication. The hashtags began trending before the royal family could even issue a whisper. Hashtag Markle exposed. Hashtag sugar baby scandal. Hashtag Harry wake up. Media analysts dove in. Facial recognition experts confirmed the image wasn't doctored. The metadata, extracted from the leaked image by digital forensic analysts, dated it to late summer 2015. Around the time Meghan was allegedly traveling through Europe under the radar, attending fashion events and fundraisers. And the man in the photo? Still officially unidentified. But internet sleuths speculated he was a tech mogul from the Middle East, a figure known for hosting private yacht gatherings with influencers and aspiring actresses. Some claimed he had been linked to other Hollywood names, some now in rehab or blacklisted. A dark undercurrent surged through the conversation. Was Meghan a sugar baby? Had her rise to royalty been paved with secrets, seductions, and strategies she had kept hidden? And worse, had Harry known? The world wanted answers. Harry, meanwhile, was spiraling. Not just from the photo, but from what it represented, a past he'd never been told about. A different Meghan, one not shaped by trauma or media persecution, but by ambition. Cold, calculated ambition. He began to replay every moment, every contradiction, every time she had dodged questions about her time in Europe, every time she had dismissed old rumors as racist, sexist, irrelevant noise, every time she'd accused others of violating her privacy while tightly curating what the public saw. And for the first time in their relationship, Harry felt something foreign. Doubt. Not the kind that creeps in and disappears after a good conversation. The kind that rots from the inside. That keeps you up at night. That rewrites everything you thought you knew. That night, he didn't sleep in their bedroom. He went for a drive. Alone. No security. No destination. He ended up on a bluff overlooking the Pacific, just staring into the endless blackness of the ocean. Somewhere deep in his gut, he felt the shifting tide. Not of the water, but of his marriage. Back home, Meghan was on the phone. Her PR team was scrambling. They were planning statements, planting distraction stories, consulting legal experts. She even considered flying to London to get ahead of the narrative. But Harry's silence was louder than any article. And the picture? It was just the beginning. Long before the royal titles, the red carpets, and the carefully staged documentaries, Meghan Markle lived a life shrouded in calculated anonymity. It wasn't that she was hiding in the shadows. She was always present, always smiling for the camera, but the full truth of her early years remained obscured behind glamour shots, curated blog posts, and a growing list of powerful connections. The woman who would one day marry a prince wasn't just acting on screen. She was acting off it too, crafting a persona, managing perception, and leaving behind pieces of herself each time she climbed a little higher. This chapter of Meghan's life, the one that predates royal scrutiny, has always been carefully guarded. It exists in fragments, whispers at industry parties, rumors traded between stylists and PR agents, and a few photos that most hoped would never resurface. It's the Meghan that existed before the public fell in love with her, and it's that very version that people closest to her believe may be the most honest of all. She started, as many young actresses do, in the shadowed corners of Hollywood. Audition rooms that reeked of desperation, producers who offered opportunities over dinner, and casting agents who judged her more for her measurements than her monologues. Meghan struggled to break in, but not for lack of trying. She hustled, relentlessly, waitressing at upscale restaurants in Beverly Hills, showing up at networking parties uninvited, clinging to any chance encounter that might lead to the next role. But according to several insiders, she wasn't just chasing roles, she was chasing access. One former LA publicist, who asked to remain unnamed, recounted seeing Meghan at a private lounge event for executives and ultra-high net worth donors. She wasn't there for auditions, the publicist recalled. She was there to be seen, to be remembered, and not for her acting resume. She worked the room like a politician. Every handshake came with a compliment. Every smile was loaded. Over time, Meghan gained a reputation. Not for being the most talented actress, but for being the most persistent. She never missed an invite. She befriended photographers, stylists, even assistants to A-listers. She knew exactly where to be and who to be seen with. And gradually, her network expanded. She dated, flirted, and charmed her way into rooms most actresses only dreamed of. It was around this time that Meghan allegedly began traveling for exclusive events, not film festivals, but private parties hosted on yachts, in villas, and at members-only resorts. These weren't illegal. They weren't scandalous in the traditional sense, but they were the kinds of gatherings where discretion was assumed and documentation discouraged. No cameras, no questions. According to one event organizer who operated in St. Tropez, Meghan was a regular face for a couple of seasons. He remembered her as charming, elegant, always well-dressed, and in control. She knew how to read the room, to cater to egos without appearing submissive. She didn't behave like a party girl. She behaved like someone who belonged. But what many never realized at the time was that these events weren't just social escapades. They were carefully curated matchmaking platforms, not for romance, but for influence. Wealthy men from oil dynasties, hedge funds, and old European nobility attended these gatherings with an unspoken understanding. Attractive, ambitious women would be there, and all parties knew the rules. Gifts were exchanged. Weekends extended. Everyone went home with more than they arrived with. The term sugar baby was never officially used, but the arrangements often mirrored that exact dynamic. And Meghan, as one European financier claimed, played her part to perfection. There's no evidence of any illegal activity, no transactions caught on paper. But the implication has always lingered, that Meghan used charm, beauty, and ambition to climb the social ladder, one discreet rendezvous at a time. Her friends during that period began to dwindle as her ambitions sharpened. One woman who lived with Meghan briefly described her as warm and fun, until she wasn't. She said Meghan had a talent for switching personalities depending on who was in the room. She could be the best friend, the perfect date, the insightful artist, but none of it felt grounded. It was like she wore people like costumes. When you no longer served her goal, she'd outgrow you. This pattern would repeat. By the time Meghan landed her recurring role on Suits, she had already undergone a transformation. No longer the aspiring actress struggling for gigs, she was now a polished media figure. One who knew how to give the right quote, dress the right way, and post the perfect Instagram caption. Her lifestyle blog, The Tig, became the centerpiece of her brand. It was part aspirational, part personal diary, a curated window into the life she wanted people to see. She shared recipes, travel guides, inspirational quotes, and behind-the-scenes looks at fashion shows. But what the TIG didn't show were the late-night phone calls to publicists begging for coverage, the quiet deals made to appear on red carpets, the favors exchanged to secure magazine mentions. One fashion editor, who once agreed to feature Meghan in a Canadian lifestyle spread, later admitted, "We didn't feature her because she was relevant. We featured her because her PR people wouldn't stop calling." Still, it worked. She embedded herself into circles that mattered. She became close with Jessica Mulroney, whose family was politically connected. She networked her way into London's elite through Soho House introductions. She flirted with royalty, not just metaphorically, but literally. Rumors swirled of Meghan asking mutual acquaintances to set her up with wealthy aristocrats visiting Toronto. And then came Prince Harry. Their meeting was framed as romantic fate, a blind date gone spectacularly right. But multiple reports suggest otherwise, that their meeting was orchestrated, that Meghan knew about Harry's Africa trips, that she studied his charity work, that she changed her wardrobe in the weeks leading up to the date to reflect a more natural aesthetic, less Hollywood, more Kensington, that everything about her approach to the meeting was calculated, from her conversation starters to her understated makeup. She knew what she was doing, said one former stylist. She'd been building to that moment for years. When Harry fell, he fell hard. And for Meghan, the opportunity was unprecedented. Global platform, untouchable branding, and above all, legitimacy. She was no longer just a girl who knew the right people. She was royalty. But the shadows of her past never truly disappeared. Photos from those yacht days were buried. NDA agreements sealed the lips of potential whistleblowers. And yet, now, years later, the truth was clawing its way back to the surface. With the scandal photo now circulating, the one with Meghan and the unknown gentleman, the world was beginning to ask questions that had previously been silenced by legal threats and tabloid fatigue. Who was Meghan Markle before the palace? Was she a survivor of a brutal industry, or a social climber playing the long game? Was she unfairly maligned by the media, or had she been expertly manipulating it all along? These weren't questions of morality, but of transparency. Prince Harry, who had sacrificed everything for her, was now forced to confront the version of Meghan she had never shared. A version built in late-night clubs, penthouse parties, and whispered introductions. And now, for the first time, it seemed the walls were closing in. Prince Harry had always considered himself a man of loyalty, loyal to his mother's memory, loyal to his military brothers, loyal to the woman he had chosen against all odds and in defiance of the royal institution that raised him. But as the days passed in Montecito after that photo surfaced, a new feeling began creeping in, slow, like fog rolling in over the ocean, but suffocating all the same. Doubt. It wasn't just the image. It was the silence that followed, the explanations that felt rehearsed, the avoidance of direct answers. Meghan had always been charismatic, persuasive, and emotionally intense, able to turn a conflict into a moment of shared victimhood, to disarm opposition with a tearful anecdote or a pointed accusation. But Harry had heard these stories too many times now, and each time, the weight of them grew heavier. He began to see things differently, in moments that had once seemed innocent. The way Meghan had reacted when he first asked about her early days in Los Angeles. The sudden pivot to how hard she had it, how she faced rejection, racism, misogyny. The way she always redirected uncomfortable truths with louder, grander narratives of overcoming adversity. It used to inspire him. Now it made him suspicious. He found himself pulling away, not in anger, but in quiet contemplation. He stopped laughing as easily. He walked the grounds of their estate alone more often. He stayed longer in the garden, sometimes just staring at the hills beyond. Staff noticed it first. One housekeeper mentioned how Prince Harry no longer made small talk. One of the bodyguards revealed that Harry had begun sleeping in the guest wing, citing stress and needing space. What no one saw were the internal conversations. The sleepless nights where Harry wrestled with the terrifying possibility that he had been played. The media had always branded him the spare, the less polished royal, the emotionally volatile one. His grief over Diana had made him both sympathetic and reckless. But Meghan? She had seen him for more than that. Or so he thought. Now, every compliment, every gaze, Every vow of eternal loyalty echoed in his mind with sinister undertones. Had she known exactly how to bait his need for affection? Had she studied his weaknesses, his longing for connection, his disdain for palace rigidity, and used them as leverage? These questions haunted him, and the answers were becoming unavoidable. It didn't help that outside their California compound, the world was reacting to the leaked image with brutal swiftness. The tabloids had declared war. American outlets were less vicious, but equally curious. Meghan's defenders, once loud and unshakable, were suddenly quiet. Her fan base was retreating. Her Netflix and Spotify projects were quietly disappearing from landing pages. Production crews, already fatigued by repeated delays and creative control issues, began backing away. But inside the walls of their home, the tension was worse than anything the press could concoct. Harry wanted to talk. He wanted an unfiltered confession, not to punish, but to understand. But every time he tried, Meghan broke down into sobs, accusing him of turning against her, of listening to people who wanted to tear them apart, of being just like the rest of them. The irony didn't escape him. He had spent years defending her from those very people, and now she was comparing him to them. On the third night after the photo leaked, Harry took a drive at midnight. He didn't tell anyone. No security, no staff. He drove up the Pacific Coast Highway with the windows down and the music off, just the sound of the waves and the wind. At one point, he pulled into a dark overlook near Malibu, parked the car, and stared into the sea. He thought about his mother, how she had been hunted, misunderstood, exploited. He had always feared marrying someone who would face the same fate. He thought Meghan was strong enough to handle it. But what if Meghan wasn't being hunted at all? What if she was the hunter? The idea terrified him. He had sacrificed everything, his family, his titles, his homeland, for a woman who may have seen him as a prize rather than a partner. He had distanced himself from his brother, ignored warnings from his closest friends, and silenced his own doubts, all for love. But now that love felt conditional. It felt like a performance. Back at home, Meghan was scrambling. She had contacted every lawyer in her phone. She wanted injunctions, takedowns, denials. She demanded her team find a way to frame the photo as manipulated. She floated the idea that the image was from a movie set, a creative project. But the truth refused to die. Too many people remembered the yacht events. Too many insiders confirmed the location, the timing, even the dress she had worn. When Harry returned that morning, Meghan was waiting. Her eyes were bloodshot, her hair undone. She had clearly been crying, but Harry didn't feel pity. Not anymore. He felt numb. "We need to talk," he said. She nodded silently. He sat across from her in the living room. No grand confrontation, just quiet devastation. "Is there anything else I don't know?" he asked, voice flat. Meghan hesitated. Then, in a tone he had heard before, the one she used when she was preparing to pivot, she said, "Do you still love me?" "That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters," she replied. Harry stared at her. That was it. That was the strategy. Not honesty, not vulnerability, but deflection. And suddenly, he realized how many times he had accepted that kind of answer. How many times he had allowed emotion to override logic. He stood up. "I need time," he said simply. And he walked out. He didn't say where he was going. He didn't promise to come back. He didn't look back. For the first time in their marriage, Harry was stepping outside the story Meghan had written for them, and into the uncertainty of his own narrative. The royal corridors were quiet, but the tension inside Clarence's house was far from subtle. A silence like this within the royal family was always loaded, measured, strategic, and almost ceremonial in its intensity. News from Montecito had reached them in whispers at first, but by the following morning, it was no longer whispers. It was headlines. That photo, the one of Meghan Markle half undressed, straddling a man on a luxury yacht, had found its way into the briefing folders delivered to Palisades. And from there, it climbed straight to the attention of King Charles III, Queen Camilla, and the heir to the throne, Prince William. What once would have been dismissed as tabloid fodder was now impossible to ignore. The image was too sharp, the details too specific, and the timing too damning. This was no mere scandal. It was an explosion capable of shaking the very stability of the monarchy's modern narrative. King Charles received the image during a morning intelligence briefing, One of the discreet but regular updates he receives from media advisors and internal security liaisons. They didn't print it out. It was shown to him on a secure tablet in a locked room, without aides present. His reaction was not rage. It was stillness, the kind of stillness that revealed just how deeply shaken he was. She lied, he finally murmured. The weight of that realization wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Charles had once given Meghan the benefit of the doubt. He had walked her down the aisle when her own father couldn't. He had defended her in the face of hostile media. He had invited her into the family with dignity. But this photo, this confirmation, rendered all of that goodwill moot. An hour later, Queen Camilla was summoned. Her reaction, however, was less restrained. Camilla had never trusted Meghan. Not because of her background or her skin color, as some outlets had suggested, but because of her methods. From the beginning, Camilla had observed Meghan's behavior with clinical caution. The way she performed sincerity, yet isolated herself from the rest of the family. The way she dressed her ambition in the language of victimhood. The way she seemed to weaponize every conflict as proof of persecution. She's a walking performance, Camilla had once told a senior aide after Meghan's Oprah interview. And now the curtain's coming down. When shown the photo, Camilla reportedly let out a cold, sardonic laugh. Well, she said. Looks like the Duchess forgot the world has a memory. But there was one royal whose reaction mattered most, Prince William. For months, even years, William had been warning Harry, often behind the scenes, sometimes even in private messages that were later leaked to the press. He had never been overtly hostile, but his skepticism had been clear. She's not what you think, he had once told Harry during a tense Christmas gathering. And when the image cracks, it will break you. Harry hadn't taken kindly to those words. Now, they echoed like prophecy. William saw the photo before his father did. One of his advisors forwarded it directly to him with a brief message, confirming contents before wider circulation. William had clicked it in silence, alone in his study. And for several minutes afterward, he just sat there, his hand covering his mouth, his brow furrowed in disbelief and grief. Not grief for Meghan, but for his brother. Because this was going to destroy him. Later that day, the three royals convened in a private strategy meeting. Charles, Camilla, and William. It wasn't public. It wasn't formal. But what was discussed in that meeting would shape the family's next steps, not just as individuals, but as an institution. What's our response? Charles asked. William leaned forward. There can't be one. Not publicly. If we engage it, we validate it. But privately, we need to begin preparing. For the separation. For the fallout. For the headlines. Harry's going to need us. Camilla shook her head. He may not want us. He still thinks she's his world. He's starting to see through it, William said. That's why this is dangerous. Because he's unraveling. And she knows it. Charles exhaled slowly. What about the children? No one answered. Because no one knew the answer. In the days that followed, royal staff were instructed to quietly review all previously sealed documents related to Meghan's background checks, the same ones conducted before her marriage to Harry. What was once deemed unnecessary to explore now needed revisiting. There was renewed interest in past relationships, former employers, and financial ties. One advisor hinted that they had been too lenient the first time around. Another believed too much had been buried to protect the narrative. Meanwhile, Prince William reached out to a mutual friend of Harry's, someone who had been close to both brothers before the split. The goal wasn't intervention. Not yet. But observation. Quiet support from a distance. William knew that if he confronted Harry too soon, the emotional backlash would be unbearable. But if he waited too long, Meghan might find a way to twist the narrative again. She's cornered, William reportedly told the friend. And that's when people like her are most dangerous. She'll lash out. She'll cry racism. She'll blame everyone but herself. The palace had been here before, during the Oprah interview, the Netflix docuseries, the memoir rollout. But this was different. This wasn't a war of words. This was evidence. Visual. Undeniable. And yet, the family still debated whether to act at all. Charles feared that public retaliation would only feed the media machine. Camilla believed Meghan would eventually self-destruct under her own weight. William, though, was firm. The time for patience was over. The family needed to prepare a fallback strategy for Harry. He needed a path back, one that didn't include Meghan. Start planning for the return, he told aides. Not to the public, but to us. That single sentence shifted the tone of the entire conversation. Because for the first time since Harry had walked away from royal duty, his family began planning for his return. Not as a prince, but as a son who had been led astray. The Montecito estate was under siege, not by protesters or paparazzi, but by a truth too loud to ignore and a silence too loud to bear. Meghan Markle, once hailed as a modern Cinderella, was cornered, not just by public scandal, but by a husband who no longer looked at her with the blind adoration that had once shielded her from every criticism. And in her world, being cornered didn't mean surrender. It meant attack. In the days following the leaked images explosion across the internet and newsstands, Meghan went into full defense mode. Her inner circle was summoned: crisis PR teams, legal advisors, brand managers, and a handful of friends who still believed in the myth, or at least in the money it promised. Inside the walls of the mansion, the atmosphere was tense and rehearsed. Her team huddled in the formal dining room, where the long table once meant for lavish, magazine-worthy brunches now became a war table. Plans were drawn, statements drafted, social campaigns outlined. "We're going to bury this," Meghan said firmly. "Like we always do." She stood at the head of the table, her posture straight, her voice unwavering. Her face, though tight and paler than usual, was still made up, a matte finish over panic. One of her lawyers, a high-powered attorney known for negotiating celebrity crises, cleared his throat. "It's going to be difficult. The image isn't fabricated. Metadata confirms it's real. The outlets haven't even published the uncensored version yet. That's coming." Meghan slammed her hand down. "Then we sue. Every single one of them. This is harassment. It's character assassination. I'm a mother, a duchess. This isn't just about me. It's about our children." That word, duchess, still rolled off her tongue with practiced authority, even as the institution it referred to had begun distancing itself in private conversations across the pond. The legal team nodded cautiously, but there was tension. The usual confidence was cracking. Meghan shifted her focus to her publicist. "What's the media strategy?" The woman adjusted her glasses and opened a folder filled with potential talking points, headlines, and responses for friendly outlets. "We frame this as a misogynistic, racially charged smear campaign. We bring up your past trauma. Reintroduce the miscarriage story if necessary. Position this as an attack not just on you, but on every woman who ever had a past. If they want to crucify a woman for being human, we make them look cruel." Meghan listened, nodding. It wasn't new to her. This was her blueprint. She had used it before, when the British press turned on her, when palace staff leaked damaging stories, when her own father betrayed her through the tabloids. Every time the narrative turned, Meghan had turned harder, recasting herself as the wounded heroine surrounded by villains. But this time, the formula wasn't landing. The public's response to the photo wasn't what it used to be. Instead of widespread sympathy, there was discomfort, not because of her past, but because of the dishonesty. People didn't judge her for the image itself, but for the lies it unmasked. The curated image of innocence. The consistent denial of any complicated history. The manipulation of Harry's heart and, by extension, the public's perception. To her detractors, this wasn't a revelation. It was confirmation. And Harry? He was drifting. He barely spoke to her. He spent his days in the guest wing, surrounded by silence, sleep-deprived, distant. At night, he took calls with people Meghan didn't recognize. Old friends, possibly. His brother, maybe. She tried to check, but the phone was now locked. When she attempted to talk to him, really talk, he shut down. "I just need time," was all he would say. So Meghan did what she had always done when the walls began to close in. She reached outward. She contacted her remaining media allies. Oprah was one of the first. A voicemail was left, emotional, reflective, hinting at another possible sit-down. There was no immediate reply. She reached out to Gayle King. Crickets. Even Tyler Perry, once her savior and protector during the chaos of Megxit, was busy. His assistant politely declined the meeting Meghan requested. That's when her frustration began to harden into fury. "They're abandoning me," she hissed to one of her advisors. "I gave them stories. I gave them access. I let them into our lives. They're protecting themselves," the advisor replied delicately. "They're waiting to see where this lands." That phrase stung. It meant that she was now toxic, radioactive in Hollywood terms. Not because she'd done something unforgivable, but because she could no longer guarantee control. And that made her a liability. Still, Meghan wasn't finished. She began crafting an Instagram video. Something unfiltered and raw, designed to show the real Meghan. A version of herself that would bypass the tabloids and speak directly to her followers. She sat in her kitchen with a cup of tea, no makeup, a simple white shirt. She pressed record. "I never wanted to have to defend my past," she began. "I never thought I'd have to explain who I was before I met my husband. I'm not ashamed of my journey. I'm not ashamed of having a life. I am, however, deeply hurt that someone from my past, someone I once cared about, would try to weaponize that history. This isn't about one photo. It's about a pattern of attack. And I won't stay silent." She ended the video with a tearful plea for understanding, for solidarity, for women everywhere. But she never posted it. The moment Harry walked into the room and saw her holding the phone, recording, something in his face made her pause. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He just looked at her and asked, "Why is everything always a performance?" That single sentence deflated her like a balloon. She put the phone down. Later that evening, her team advised against posting. The tide was too volatile. Any misstep could make things worse. And worse wasn't something they could afford anymore. Then came the next wave. 2 more photos leaked, both from the same European summer event. None as graphic, but both suggestive enough to feed the narrative. One showed Meghan with her head on another man's shoulder, a champagne glass in one hand, the other man's hand on her thigh. Another showed her whispering into the ear of a guest with her lips grazing his skin. It was becoming a flood. The Daily Mail published a scathing piece titled, "The Duchess and the Double Life?" The Sun followed with, "Royal lies. What else don't we know?" Meghan was unraveling. For the first time since marrying into the royal family, she realized something terrifying. The story was no longer hers to control. The headlines were no longer a trickle. They were a flood. Overnight, the story moved from the dark corners of gossip blogs to front-page real estate across the English-speaking world. The press, once sharply divided over Meghan Markle's position as a modern royal, now seemed unified, not in moral outrage, but in revelation. It wasn't just the image anymore. It was the story behind it, the cracks in the narrative, and the undeniable truth that Meghan's carefully crafted persona was collapsing in real time. The Daily Mail, which had for years waged both open and coded war against her, released a week-long exposé titled The Meghan Files. The publication promised to investigate the years before Suits, before Soho House, before Harry, back when Meghan was known simply as the ambitious girl from LA with a dream and a plan. They didn't hold back. One piece revealed alleged testimonies from 2 individuals who had attended the same yacht event where the infamous image was taken. Neither gave their full name, but both confirmed that Meghan had been a recurring presence at such events between 2013 and 2016. She wasn't a stranger, one source said. She was part of the scenery, glamorous, calculated, and unforgettable. Within 24 hours, the hashtag #MeghanLied trended globally on X, formerly Twitter, followed closely by hashtag Royal Reckoning, hashtag Yachtgate, and the most explosive of all, hashtag Duchess Deceit. But while online forums and media channels debated her motives, her past, and her performance, something more troubling began to occur. People stopped defending her. In the early days of the royal split, Meghan had garnered massive support from American audiences. Women saw her as a symbol of breaking barriers. Minorities saw her as a representative of themselves within a historically closed institution. Progressives viewed her as a disruptor. And for a time, she leaned heavily into those narratives. But scandal has a way of cutting through ideology. Her most vocal defenders began issuing vague, non-committal statements. Major media figures who once praised her resilience now said they were saddened or disappointed. Celebrity allies distanced themselves. Social media influencers who had built entire channels around praising the Sussexes began to pivot their content, some deleting old videos, others issuing half-hearted apologies to their viewers for believing too much. Spotify had already walked away from their contract months earlier. Netflix, now engulfed in internal controversy over its continued relationship with the Sussexes, began reassessing its investment. Executives reportedly held emergency meetings to discuss the optics of keeping Meghan attached to multiple projects. The public doesn't buy the fairy tale anymore, one unnamed executive told Variety. We're dealing with a credibility crisis. Within Meghan's inner circle, there was panic. Her crisis PR team advised full retreat from the public eye. No statements, no social posts, no appearances. But Meghan resisted. She wanted to fight. She believed she could still salvage her reputation if she could just speak directly to the people. But every move she made now sparked backlash. A seemingly innocent walk with her children, staged for photographers, drew scorn. Now she remembers she's a mom? One online commenter wrote, garnering thousands of likes. An attempt to relaunch the TIG, her once popular lifestyle blog, was met with ridicule. Articles titled, "No one's interested in her avocado toast anymore," flooded beauty and culture sites. Meanwhile, talk shows, late-night comedians, and daytime panels began poking fun at her. What had once been off-limits, any mockery of Meghan, had now become fair game. Memes exploded across TikTok and Instagram. Some were tasteless, others were clever, but they all had one thing in common. They exposed the shift in public sentiment. Even feminists, once her staunchest defenders, began to fracture in their support. A viral op-ed by a prominent academic hit particularly hard. Titled, "Accountability is not misogyny." The article argued that shielding Meghan from criticism because of her gender or race did a disservice to real victims. "We cannot defend lies cloaked in the language of progress," the piece read. "We must demand honesty from those who claim to speak on our behalf." This sentiment echoed through university halls, activist circles, and social justice platforms. And yet, the biggest blow came not from the media, but from the public, ordinary people, many of whom had once admired her. They had watched her wedding, sympathized with her pain, reposted her quotes about healing and empowerment. But now, they felt betrayed. "She used us," one woman commented under a news post. "She used our sympathy to climb, and now we see what was behind the curtain." Across the UK, opinion polls shifted rapidly. Where once 50% of Brits had supported Meghan's decision to leave the royal family, that number now dipped below 20%. In the United States, approval among younger audiences fell sharply. Even her once loyal fan base of American millennial women, the demographic most aligned with her values, began to waver. The tide had turned, and Meghan felt it. For someone who had built her identity on public perception, the loss of control was existential. She began reviewing old interviews, watching clips from her Oprah sit-down, analyzing where things had gone wrong. She asked advisors if there was a way to rebrand. Could she still run for office one day? Could she pivot into wellness? Would people still read her memoir? The answers were never satisfying. "You'll always have an audience," one of her staffers said gently, "but it might not be the one you hoped for." It was during this time that Prince Harry, emotionally absent, but physically present, began to voice concerns about the children. He worried about their exposure, their schooling, their emotional stability. And for the first time since the scandal began, he suggested something that froze Meghan in place. "Maybe we should take a break," he said. "From what?" she asked. "From us. From the spotlight. From everything." She didn't respond, but her eyes filled with tears. She knew what that meant. Not just space, not just silence, but the first real sign that Harry, the man who once believed her to be his salvation, was ready to walk away. And so, as the public firestorm burned hotter, Meghan found herself in an unfamiliar position, powerless. The public had turned. Her husband was slipping away. The crown no longer acknowledged her. The media didn't fear her. And her past had returned with brutal clarity. No amount of branding could fix that now.